Recognize you by name before speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. For this panel, I would like to welcome our three witnesses. We have Khan Manhas, founder for Terramera Incorporation. In person. We are also joined by Major General Paul Payton, Military Deputy Director, Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic by video conference. Welcome. And our third witness today in person is here, Mr. Robert Esselin, Chief Executive Officer representing U15 Canada. So all the witnesses will have 5 minutes for their opening remarks, and then we will go into our round of questioning. Welcome to this committee, and we will start with Mr. Manhas. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Madame la Présidente, membres honorables du comité.
Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee, thank you for the invitation. Canada's sovereignty rests on our ability to measure, understand, and protect what nature has given us.
I'm the founder of Terramera, Miraterra, and Catalera. 3 Canadian companies, 16 years, around 350 patents held here in Canada. My background is biology and law. And I want to start with a question. What is defense actually for? We talk about defense as borders and fighter jets, and those matter. But they are the means, not the purpose. The purpose of defense is to make sure Canada keeps operating as a nation, even under disruption. A hostile state, a pandemic, a supply chain collapse, a closed border. Defense is not just about being ready to fight back. It's being resilient enough to keep going. Once we accept that, energy, critical minerals, and food all show up immediately. 3 terms this committee should hold together. Food sovereignty is our ability to produce our own food. Food security is reliable access to it. And food defense is whether our food system can withstand attack or disruption. The first 2 we talk about, the third we don't enough. If the U.S. border closed tomorrow, Canada has roughly 3 to 5 days of fresh food, lettuce, tomatoes, berries, gone in 72 hours. We are the 5th largest agricultural exporter in the world, running our own grocery system in a just-in-time model. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Ukraine was the breadbasket of Europe. One of the first things Russia did was attack Ukrainian farmland. Clearing landmines spreads chemicals across the soil. Ukraine went from feeding Europe to dropping exports by 90%. 30% of its total agricultural potential has been destroyed. That was not collateral damage. That's strategy. Farmland was the target. Article 3 of the NATO Treaty names food and water systems as a central pillar of allied civilian resilience. We signed that treaty. We just have to build it into our strategy. In February, Canada launched its first defense industrial strategy. The build, partner, buy framework is right, but it makes no mention of food. At Davos, the Prime Minister himself said, a country that cannot feed itself has few options. I'm here to help this committee close that gap. Now the opportunity. The Netherlands, a country roughly the size of Vancouver Island, is the 2nd largest agricultural exporter in the world. Canada is 5th. That gap is not geography, it's not weather, it's strategy. And it's fixable. Canada now has the ability to measure our natural world, soil, food, water, down to parts per million and parts per billion. Not weeks later, but in and near the field, in minutes. Miraterra has built instruments that can scan soil using advanced spectroscopy and AI connected to millions of scientific publications. That technology was built in Canada together with Canadian research, and we can monitor soil health institutions, and we can monitor soil health and carbon and pathogens and detect chemical contaminations at parts per billion. We can detect nanoplastics field by field. We can monitor the state of Canadian farmland and Canadian lands. I call this strategic natural intelligence. It's a defense capability. It exists in Canadian companies and research organizations right now. And this is where AI changes the equation. The same instruments that advise a Saskatchewan farmer on fertility and production can detect a contamination event or a disruption in Quebec. The same soil data that drives $30 billion of GDP for every % of agricultural productivity we can improve is the system that can tell our defense systems whether our land that feeds us is under attack. One system, two missions. That is what dual use is supposed to do. Canada started building a national soil map in the 1980s. Budget cuts stopped it. We could build a living digital version now at a fraction of the original cost. It would tell us in real time if our farmland was under attack. The cost, less than 1 to 3 fighter jets, depending on how deep we want to go. So a few recommendations. First, add strategic biology and food systems as critical investment areas within Canada's dual-use defense research framework. Food and soil intelligence belong inside the build, partner, buy, and dual-use architecture. Second, fund a living national digital soil map. The technology is built in Canada and ready. Third, create a sovereign IP retention mechanism with retention covenants that keep Canadian-funded science Canadian-owned long enough to matter. We do not have a research problem. We have a commercialization problem, an adoption problem, and a retention problem. Fourth, increase our growth and adoption of innovative Canadian research and science solutions. Not all will work. We need to be okay with placing bold and strategic bets. Finally, with ITBs, build a clear policy that allows us to invest and grow in innovative Canadian solutions and critical Canadian infrastructure that puts resilience first. The Prime Minister was right at Davos. A country that can't feed itself has few options. Let's make sure that's not us.
Thank you. We will now proceed to Major General Peyton, and he's joining us virtually. So please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Madam Chair, Vice Chairs, and honorable members of the committee, good afternoon, bonjour, bon après-midi, et merci pour l'opportunité de participer.
Good afternoon and welcome thank you for the opportunity to participate in the work of this committee.
It's an honor to speak on behalf of NATO Diana, the Alliance's Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. For those not familiar with Diana's program mandate, we exist to close the gap between emerging technology and military capability. Established in 2022, we identify innovators developing breakthrough dual-use solutions and accelerate their adoption, leading to real capability advantage for our soldiers, sailors, aviators, and special operators, and other security-related entities across the Alliance. NATO Diana provides a structured, alliance-wide pipeline that connects innovators, test environments, trusted capital, and end users, ensuring that promising solutions move from idea to testing, validation, and operational use. In collaboration with other NATO entities, we identify priority defense and security needs and communicate those to industry in the form of problem statements. Solution proposals are rigorously vetted to determine those with the greatest potential. Following national security reviews, those selected receive framework contracts and enter our Defense Focus Accelerator program. This includes curriculum delivery through our network of 16 accelerators.
Stop the clock. I think there is some interpretation issue. Just let me look into it. Ontario?
Moi, j'ai pas mon appareil. Est-ce que c'est seulement moi ou les autres membres l'ont? Est-ce que tu as la traduction, Maxime?
Oui, oui.
Okay, so it's just a technical issue on my side, so it will be okay. We can keep going, and if someone can just look for my device. Merci.
Look into it and then we will start.
Faisons un essai avec les interprètes, s'il vous plaît, si vous pouvez parler.
Okay, sorry for the interpretation, for stopping this. We will start the clock. Please, Major General Payton, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks. So as I said, following national security reviews, those that are selected receive framework contacts and they enter our defense-focused accelerator program. And that includes curriculum delivery through a network of 16 accelerator sites, testing, evaluation, verification, and validation at a network of over 200 affiliated test centers and participation in NATO operational experimentation events. Diana has two particularly unique instruments in its program. The first is the NATO Diana Capital Network, which connects vetted NATO-aligned investors with our selected companies, ensuring they receive the capital required to scale. The second is the Rapid Adoption Service Regulation, which allows NATO and the allies to contract with innovators for follow-on development and prototyping contracts without competition. Also under this regulation, validated prototypes can be procured through NATO's procurement agencies, again without the need for further competition. We started program operations in June of 2023 with our pilot launch of 3 challenges or problem statements issued to innovators across the alliance. In 2024, that grew to 5 challenges, and in July of 25, we launched 10 challenge statements. We now have 267 companies that are part of our portfolio, all of which are solutions available to the alliance's defense and security entities through the Rapid Adoption Service. Our organization's main headquarters is in London, UK. There's a regional hub in Tallinn, Estonia, and of course, the North American regional office opened here in Halifax in late 2024. And throughout Diana's brief history, Canada has played a significant role. As you can tell by my uniform, I'm a Canadian Army officer, one of 2 general officers in the program, and I've been with Diana since October of 24. Grateful to have the support of a small but very mighty team of Canadian Armed Forces members and civilians, including the Regional Director for North America, Christine Hansen. And these Canadians serve as exceptional ambassadors to our multinational team of professionals from 6 allied nations here at our Halifax office. Dartmouth, Nova Scotia is home to one of Diana's 16 accelerator sites, the Center of Ocean Ventures and Entrepreneurship, or COVE, whose team provides outstanding mentorship to assigned Diana innovators and significant exposure to defense investment opportunities. They work closely with Communitech from Kitchener-Waterloo, who support COVE in program delivery. Within Canada, there are 16 test centers located in 6 provinces that provide scientific testing support opportunities to the eligible Diana program participants. Our expanding program also relies on the generous support of 52 Canadian professionals that loan their expertise and experience to the program, assisting in the down selection of the most promising innovator proposals and providing mentorship during the acceleration phase. Canadian innovators have been very well represented. In each of the program's iterations, Canada has been overrepresented in applications. In our pilot challenge launched in 2023, 211 of the 13 applications came from Canada, the second highest number across the alliance. 44 companies were selected to join the program, of which 7 were Canadian. In 2024, Canada had the 3rd highest number of applications, 339 of 2,600, and 6 of the 75 companies selected were Canadian. I'm very happy to say in our latest challenge call, we received 3,600 applications, and Canada had the highest number of applications in the alliance with 574. And of the 150 companies that were selected and currently going through the accelerator program, 22 are Canadian. Canada's also been leading in leveraging the Rapid Adoption Service to enter follow-on development and prototyping contracts. We were the first to exercise this process in 2025. We now have 2 contracts tendered, 3 others where the program arrangements and specifications are being co-developed, and an additional 3 more indications of interest. Also worth noting that through an initiative by DRDC called the Funding for Canadian Innovators and Accelerators of NATO Diana, Canadian innovators selected into the program received grants of up to $200,000 per innovator, which is in addition to the 100,000 euros selected innovators received from NATO Diana. We are the only nation that provides this additional financial support. Diana has proven to be a very successful program. Canada is a huge part of that success. The support we receive from the Government of Canada and the level of interest from Canadian companies has been incredible. And I think it's something that we can be proud of our nation's continued contributions to this important NATO initiative. I hope that provides some value to considerations, and thank you again for this opportunity.
We will now proceed to Mr. Esselin. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et merci de m'avoir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the invitation to appear today. Canada has now reached NATO's 2% defense spending target.
Devant nous, la question est de savoir.
That milestone is a signal of seriousness, and we have to know what we're going to do with it. The answer must center on strengthening Canadian industrial capacity and securing the innovation, strengths, and sovereign capabilities on which our future resilience will depend. Canada's economic challenge is well understood. For decades, we have faced a persistent productivity gap relative to our peers. Sustained growth depends not only on generating new ideas, but on translating them into firms, industries, and market power that capture value over time.
An impressive level. Our leading research universities, which I'm proud to represent, are national assets to drive innovation and dual-use technologies. But we have been far less effective at turning those strengths into firms that scale intellectual property that anchors value and industries that generate sustained economic returns. The issue is not the quality of our inputs, it is our ability to translate them into outcomes. The new Defense Industrial Strategy creates an opportunity to address this gap. By identifying critical technologies linked to sovereign capabilities, it establishes a clear and sustained demand signal. That signal can anchor our research and talent capacity built through decades of public investment with a national effort to develop new technological capabilities. But to do so, we must move beyond episodic collaboration and toward structured long-term partnerships, particularly with Canada leading research universities. When talent, research, and industry are aligned and connected to real demand, we can build and sustain technological leadership. That is ultimately what the Defense Industrial Strategy makes possible. That matters because productivity is not simply about inputs. It is about whether an economy can consistently convert knowledge into value at scale. Canadian universities perform approximately $19 billion in research annually and account for most of the country's research personnel. Yet, Canada invests less than 5% of federal research spending on defense, compared with roughly 20% across the OECD and more than 50% in the United States. Of that limiting funding, only a very small share flows through higher education. In the United States, 15% of federal university research is defense funded. In short, Canada has world-class research capacity, including across the dual-use technologies identified in the Defense Industrial Strategy, but lacks the institutional interfaces required to mobilize it toward sovereign capabilities. Closing that gap is now essential. Countries that have addressed this challenge have done so by building integrated innovation ecosystem, linking industry, academia, and government through structured and sustained partnership. In the US, for example, MIT Lincoln Labs support advanced defense systems development for the Department of Defense, while the GPL at Caltech operates as university-managed lab delivering complex, mission-driven system for NASA. These models create continuity from discovery to deployment and embed research capacity directly with national missions. Canada has not built comparable interfaces at scale. Si la mise en œuvre de la stratégie industrielle de défense constitue
If the implementation of the Defense Industrial Strategy treats industry and academia as separate silos, it will miss the opportunity to build something far more consequential, a set of predictable, repeatable pathways that connect talent, research, and industry into an innovation system capable of producing and scaling technological capability. So it's not a question of spending more, but it is a question of building a system in which universities, firms, and government labs, in this case federal labs, operate not as disconnected actors, but as an integrated engine of innovation. Creating structured research mechanisms will allow us to meet this moment. If we get this right, it will not only strengthen our security, but it will help resolve one of Canada's most persistent economic challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will proceed with our first round of questioning, and we will begin with MP Baldinelli for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before I begin, I just want to ask a question of yourself and to our clerk, as I could. As part of the study, we've extended invitations to ministers to appear on this important study, which, may I remind all members, was initiated by a motion of my Liberal friends. So we had invited the Minister of Industry, the Minister of National Defence, the Minister of Transportation, Transformation, Public Works and Procurement, and the Secretary of State Defense Procurement to appear. I mean, this is an important study. I guess we will all agree to that. It's $81.1 billion the government has announced in spending over a 5-year period on defense. And we've also released the new defense industrial strategy. So I'm just asking yourself and the clerk, if you could, on the status of these invitations and the reasons if or not these individuals can appear.
Thank you. Let me just check. Thank you, MP Baldinelli. Sorry for that. We have a replacement clerk, and he will send a message and try to find out what the response is in regards to the invitations extended.
Yes, please.
Yes.
If you could share that information with the committee members,
Yeah.
by email and the reasons. And also, I mean, there's only 4 meetings, so. Right, so if we could find that information as quickly as possible, that would be good. I'm going to begin with Mr. Aslan, if I could, and thank you for appearing here today, and thank you for your work on behalf of the U15. It's interesting. Some of the concerns that have been raised at several studies have a certain theme to them with regards to it's not the quality of the work and the researchers that we have. It's about bridging that gap, that notion of the valley of death, to take that idea, the quality idea, the IP that's being generated here and bringing it to fruition in terms of seeing it scaled and become, a proudly Canadian company. So what is the current state of cooperation that you could say, between Canadian universities and colleges with the defense industry?
So this is a muscle that has been atrophied for decades. When you look at history of Canada, during the Second World War emerged a National Research Council. I think a lot of our leading research universities at that time were involved in the war effort. But given the decades of cuts at the Department of Defense, everything being relative, those links have slowly but surely been atrophied. Not to say there are not researchers who have been working in research, but I think this is something we have to rejuvenate as a country. This is something that we have to stimulate, and now we have a framework, the Defense Industrial Strategy, to do so. So the idea is to create these new interfaces, these new pathways that don't exist between universities and the Defense Department and the Government of Canada in general.
General Payton, you explained Diana beautifully and the remarkable work that I believe that's taking place there, and the active participation of Canadian companies that are in there. Are there ways, for example, to work or greater cooperation to see that colleges and universities are able to participate in that? I mean, we talked about structured systems that you had mentioned, Mr. Aslan. So are there ways? I mean, you've got the incubators, you've got the innovation hubs. That notion of taking that great idea and then bridging that gap. Does Diana play a role in that at all?
Yeah, sir. Thanks for the question. I think that's really good. Sorry, am I on here?
Yes.
Yeah, It's interesting. We do actually bring together academia into the program, and from a Canadian nexus, we actually deal with some of our universities as we're trying to find the right, the best test center facilities that are available where we can bring our innovators. And there's been recommendations, certainly out of Ontario, with regards to quantum support for some of our innovators that are, that work in that area. I think there's more opportunities for us to work with academia. Look at the structure of the Diana program. We brought academia into the program. In fact, many of our challenge managers come from the academic community, and they still have the linkages within those communities. There are still more opportunities, I think, for us to engage from NATO Diana with academia, and certainly from previous experience in the Canadian Forces and in my previous job, that was one of the things that we identified as, there ought to be better opportunities for collaboration.
For example, the facility in Halifax, does it work closely with the universities that are in Nova Scotia, for example, on the work that's taking place there?
So we do have some relationships with the universities here in Nova Scotia. Are we working as tightly with them right now? It's a pretty small footprint that we've got in the Halifax office currently. As we build that out, we'll certainly work with the universities. That's one of the expectations that we have from the regional office here.
My short time left. Well,
40 seconds because we stopped for, yeah.
And if I could, I mean, which of the emerging technologies are most likely to define Canada's defensive capabilities over the next 10 years?
Well, that is a fantastic question. I think there are, in NATO, there's 9 emerging disruptive technology focus areas. When we look at the ones that seem to be the most compelling on a defense and security side, I think certainly in the secure information space, I think quantum, AI, innovations in the human health and performance side that actually speak to national resilience, different opportunities. We've got a great company out of Ontario, Kidney Labs, that has a portable dialysis unit as an example. There are so many different areas where we could be leaning forward. That's part of the Diana program, is to find out, okay, where are the areas that are most significant, and how do we find those innovators and accelerate their solutions?
Thank you. Time is up for MP Baldinelli. Now we will proceed to MP McKelvey for 6 minutes. Please go ahead, MP McKelvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is for Major General. You mentioned a lot of the collaborations that have happened with business and innovation, and that you're starting to move more into the academic sector. I'm just wondering, how do you bring these new groups that haven't worked in this space? What are the security hurdles that they have to go through? How effective have you been at working through that for both industry, but also for the academic sector, which traditionally hasn't worked in this space?
So because we are a dual use organization, we operate in the unclassified space. So it's not actually that difficult for us. With regards to our innovators, they all go through an industry security vetting process. Once we receive the applications and we've down selected the most promising, they are then vetted by their own national industrial security vetting due diligence process. And some are actually vetted out because of either funds are coming from a location that the alliance does not do business with, or some of the ownership of the company may be tied to countries that we're not interested really in dealing with. So there is a vetting process there. When we work with the innovators, and the question often comes up about intellectual property. That's part of our curriculum delivery, is teaching the innovators about their responsibility to protect their IP. When we get questions from the innovators, we compare them through some of our legal connections to help them address specific questions. And then all of the evaluators, as an example, that help us down select these companies all have to undergo a non-disclosure agreement, and many of them come from the defense community. So the hurdles that we've faced haven't been as significant as one might think they've been. It is a question, and it has come up with regards to university access and test facilities, but practically speaking, it hasn't been a big issue for us just yet.
Great. And my next question is for Mr. Eslin. How are universities getting prepared for this? IP, we talked about some of the issues with IP and commercialization before. What sorts of standard agreements can be made around IP that defense can agree with? Are there things that you still have to do more work on, or are you pretty much ready to go in terms of striking IP agreements?
I will say that on IP, we've done a lot of work already with the RDC. So a lot of our institutions in the U15, so the RDC is the research arm of the Department of Defense. Think about it as a defense federal lab in a way. We have comprehensive agreements with many of our institutions. There are RP clauses there. We've worked around these issues. Obviously, there are some adjustments going forward, but I don't anticipate, Madam Chair, this will be a major obstacle going forward for our institution. In other words, we understand that on national security, on sovereignty, there are imperatives that the government obviously has on IP, and our institutions are willing to play ball on that.
Thank you. And Major General, do you have any early examples of success in terms of working with universities and the academic sector where you've had some discoveries or you've had some good commercialization stories to date?
You're please muted, Major General Payton. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Okay, I'm good. I need a lot of hand-holding to get through the day. Interesting. A lot of our innovators are actually spin-outs or spin-offs from universities, and there's a great company one out of the Netherlands that was mapping oyster beds or had a university solution to do that, and recognized the opportunity for surveillance of critical underwater infrastructure, and that company grew under the Diana program and signed a contract with the Dutch Navy. So there are, like I say, the innovators are doing very well. We've had discussions again here in Canada about how we leverage the different labs, research, the facilities that exist within the universities here. And like I say, there was a consortium of 3 universities in Ontario that had great quantum test facilities that would support the program. So I know as we do an analysis of trying to understand, okay, do we have the right test facilities in the right geographic locations across the alliance? Where are gaps? And where we can fill those gaps, we look to fill them. And I will say and I think this is something that I didn't realize when I came into the job, the innovation ecosystem within Canada is very vibrant. There is a significant amount of talent within Canada that I just didn't realize that. And here in Halifax, I know we've had some initial meetings with Dalhousie University and St. Mary's University. And again, it's a small office. We're still kind of getting our footprint within the region, but we're making progress there.
Thank you. And through our venture into this dual use here in Canada with Borealis, do you see that there will be significant potential for us to continue or really cause those collaborations that we have with NATO and our other partners to flourish, or will we be able to grow on that and amplify that?
I think so. I think it was a great initiative to lean forward and establish the Defense Innovation Secure Hubs. I know the first pilot one is in Halifax, Nova Scotia, or in Dartmouth. I believe it's co-located with Cove. And I think that is a great facility. As if I look at it from the Diana perspective, as some of our innovators mature their solutions and we see the defense pathways where there are secure requirements, being able to bring them into a facility with end users, whether that's Navy, Army, Air Force, then.
MP McKelvey, and thank you. We will now proceed to MP Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Madame la Présidente, je salue les témoins qui sont avec nous aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses who are here today. So I'm going to start with Major General Payton. So you have chosen 22 businesses, 150 out of the 24 countries, and the potential is here. So the challenge here is to transform this innovation into a first client here and true adoption right here?
Yeah, and I will go back to a comment. I'll go back to a comment that was made by the original witness, Karen. I don't think there's an innovation or an ideas problem. There is an adoption problem. It is the pull through of those solutions to actually get them into the hands of the end users. That is where the real challenge exists. I wouldn't say that Canada is unique to that problem. We see it as we're dealing all across the alliance. What I do see, though, is within Canadian Defence, a degree of enthusiasm to try new approaches. Like I say, Canada was the first to leverage the Rapid Adoption Service regulation. We are the most active in that space in terms of how many contracts are tendered, those that are being considered, and where we have, those that are in progress, and where we have indications of interest. So I think, on the Canadian side, there is a significant degree of interest. Even when I look at the staffing of NATO Diana writ whole, if you look at the the NATO international civilians, 21% of them within our NATO Diana are Canadian. 4 of the 7.
Thank you, Major General. So in allied countries that are the most performance, is the military performance used as a strategic lever to mature national strategies?
Sorry, can you say that again?
In the allied countries that are performing, is military supplies used as a military strategic lever for technology?
I think, yeah, well, it differs across each of the nations in the alliance. Some of them are more mature in their innovation ecosystems that they've developed, but some of them are leaning very far forward. I look at Poland, just initiated and affiliated with NATO Diana, a living lab that they've operated or that they've just opened in Gdansk, where they're trying to bring the innovators together in a central spot where end users can come and access and try the products that are there. So, do they see innovation as part of their direction going forward with the capabilities of their defense forces, not just defense but security writ large? Absolutely, they do.
Thank you. When a business sees that big contracts go to foreign countries, does that mean that we don't feel like investing in local research and development here in Canada?
Sorry, was that a question for me?
Yes.
Well, I can tell you, as I speak to some of the innovators, there have been previously challenges in accessing the Canadian market. And in some cases, it has been easier for those innovators to deal with countries outside of Canada. But I will again say, like, what we are seeing now, certainly from Canadian Defence, is a greater interest and I'm representing NATO Diana here, but I see Canadian Defence entities leaning into the Diana program to pull some of these innovations into prototyping contracts.
I'll give you some concrete examples. In the replacement of the CP-140 Aurora, the company called Bombardier, they were talking about $10.4 billion. So the federal government took choice without calls for tenders with American Boeing. So we had a solution here, but they didn't even allow the Canadian company to put in an offer. So I would like you to answer, do you think this kind of behavior is going to harm the research and development?
Yeah, sir, I'm sorry. I'm probably not the right person to address that. It wasn't part of the program. I understand the defense requirements process, but I can't speak to that, sir. Sorry.
Okay. I'll give you another example. In a contract of $100 million, a company called Cadex from Quebec had to go to the outside tribunal to relook at a call for tender, which was considered too restrictive. So we want to innovate, supposedly, but you have to go to a court in order to be able to contest a call for tender because of the government criteria. Do you think that this sort of situation is going to stop and unstimulate innovation here right in Canada?
Yeah, sorry, sir. Again, I am not the person to speak to Canadian Defence acquisition policies right now. That is not the place where I sit, and there's certainly other experts within the Canadian Forces that could better address that question.
Général.
Okay, we'll keep it simple, Major General. So if I have a garden and I don't water it, do you think that my garden will grow? It's the same sort of thing. We've got businesses here that are not being encouraged, and we're buying foreign solutions, but at the same time, we're told we want to be sovereign economically and defense-wise. Do you think that people are going to want to invest here when the government is turning businesses away?
For MP Blanchet-Jonca, maybe we will come back. You can come back in the second round.
Écrit, Madame la Présidente.
I will be happy to get a response in writing, Madam Chair.
Is it possible to provide a written response to MP Blanchet-Jonca's question?
I think that is a question that's better addressed to folks that are either serving within the Chief Force Development, Chief Program, or some entity within the Vice Chief of Defense Staff Office. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to push back on you. That's just not, I work for NATO Diana now. That's just not the space that I'm in.
Thank you. With that, the first round comes to an end, and we will start our second round of 5 minutes with MP Mahal.
So, point of order, Madam. Just from a time standpoint, what time did we start, and how much time do we have for?
So I think we will have 5 minutes with MP Mahal, MP Nathan, 5 minutes, and then 2.5 minutes. That's where we will stop, and then suspend the meeting, and then go into the second panel. No.
Can I start?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here with us today. I want to start with Major General Payton. General, Edmonton is home to thousands of active duty Canadian Force service members. As a military city and hub to defense innovation, how accessible Diana to small and medium-sized Canadian firms? And are they successfully competing for participation within the program? If you can comment.
Yeah, I can, sir, and I'm well aware of Edmonton. In fact, I served many years there, and I really enjoy the city. I can tell you that from Western Canada, 18% of the companies came from the proposals that we received came from Canada, or sorry, came from Western Canada. Actually, came from Alberta. So I think there is there is an active involvement of the innovators within Western Canada and Alberta in particular that understand what Diana is doing. In fact, our regional director right now is at the defense conference that is occurring. I believe it's in Calgary this week. And we do have test center facilities in Alberta as well. So we are active all across Canada.
Given the size of Canada's Arctic region, how can Canada effectively leverage modern drone technology to secure and defend the region? If you can comment.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. In fact, one of the challenges that we initiated this last year was operations in extreme environments, which had a very specific focus on the Arctic. It's not just drones, though. There are so many other capabilities that are available for sense and surveillance, whether they're space platforms, drones certainly being one of them, or ground-based platforms. Within Diana, the innovators that we pick up for that particular challenge, and I believe there were 10 or 15 innovators that were selected for that particular challenge, we will leverage the opportunities in the Arctic for testing to connect those innovators with end users. Opnanook, as an example, is one of the operational experiments and exercise that NATO Diana will leverage to bring our innovators so they have the opportunity to test their solutions, showcase their solutions in front of the innovators in the real operational environments that they'll be required.
Now I would like to move on to Mr. Eslin. Canada produces world-class research, and you have mentioned that, Mr. Minhas mentioned in their opening statement that, and this is not just you, we have heard from different committees during our the witness testimonies. When it comes to research and excellence at the university level, at the college level, Canada is at par with the world when it comes to excellence. But when it comes to commercialization, we lag behind, be it AI, be it R&D, be it innovation and technology. So I want to know what are the main barriers to the research that becoming Canadian firms Canadian jobs and Canadian capabilities, in your opinion?
Great question, Madam Chair. I think, in a nutshell, if I want to be very frank, it's a lack of absorptive capacity from the private sector side. Business R&D in this country is really, really low, and the size of our firms compared to the U.S. is tilted on the small side. So we don't have enough large firms that does R&D at scale. Just to give you a stat, Madam Chair, 17% of Canadian manufacturing export are considered high-tech. That's compared to about 30% in the U.S. So in other words, we can produce the best invention, the best innovation. If it's not captured on the private sector side, we're not going to get the benefits on the innovation productivity side. And this is why I speak about interfaces and pathways, because unless we connect all these things together, we're not going to get the results that we need for this country.
During your testimony, you also mentioned that we are not in parallel to when it comes to federal funding. And you gave an example of the U.S., that they spend about 15% of their federal budget on the university research. Where do we stand in comparison to countries like U.S.?
So ours would be only 5%, but on that 5%, most of the R&D would go to federal labs, such as the NRC, National Research Council, and the RDC, which is the federal lab inside the Department of Defense. Less than 1% would go to universities. So we're not going to be able to do what we need to do as a country on innovation if we don't change that fundamentally. I want to be clear, it's not just a question of funding.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up for
Okay.
MP Mahal. So we will now proceed to MP Nathan for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
I'm going to give up my time to Talib.
Okay, MP Noor Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to my colleague, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Karn, it's good to see you here. It's good to see a homegrown Vancouver Granville company here doing amazing work in the space that you're in, and I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, the jobs you're creating, and the innovative research and the innovative businesses that you are now leading. One of the things I wanted to touch on has to do with how, in your case, Terramera's soil health and carbon sequestration technology could contribute to Northern and Arctic food sovereignty as a defense-relevant objective. Obviously, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about is how can we enhance cooperation with Indigenous and Northern communities, as well as the private sector, to address the evolving threats to the north, to build climate-resilient, dual-use or multi-purpose infrastructure, particularly around this area. So anything that you could share with us in that regard would be great.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So one of the greatest capacities that Canada has as the second largest country in the world is the ability of lands to actually hold and sequester carbon in soil. Soil is, 59% of all of life on the planet is actually in soil. The largest carbon sink that we have. The difficulty is that we have a poor ability to understand what's actually happening in our soil. So as we start measuring soil health and in particular organic matter, we actually have an opportunity in all across Canada and in the north to be able to look at the capacity of those lands to actually provide food or not, as well as to provide resilience against major climate changes. So one concrete example is that for every 1% increase in the health of the soil measured by organic matter, that every hectare of land holds 200,000 liters more water. So actually increase, measure the baseline of soil health and increase it by, say, 10%. That's 2 million hectares. It's like, 20 swimming. And you think about that in terms of fires or droughts, it has a huge capacity as well as for productivity.
So some are going to say, though, that that's really about improving food productivity, not necessarily about defense and dual use. How do you bridge that gap for folks that would say, well, that should be really bucketed over here rather than as part of a dual use opportunity for Canada?
Well, I mean, one of the key things is that being able to actually measure what's happening in our soils is, biological systems are all connected. And so if there's an attack on or a disruption to soils, it affects the entire country and the ability for those lands to actually produce. So it's critically a defense capability because, well, for one, it's food defense, but it's also resilience against disruptions. And so if we can actually be able to monitor that in real time, that actually contributes to our ability, just like we measure what's happening in our air,
Right.
what we measure in our soil is critical.
So this takes me to the whole question of ag tech risk. Obviously, your platform involves manipulating biological active ingredients at scale. It's, biotechnology's military applications sometimes complicate the dual use dilemma because the same infrastructure, the same tools, the same knowledge used to develop beneficial products can be sort of used for harmful purposes. What governance frameworks do you use, and how does Canada's current dual-use oversight regime actually adequately address risks in the space of ag tech?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and this is where, I mean, both to your last question and this one, one of the capabilities we have is to be able to have on one side, this is physical AI, so we can actually measure what's actually happening in the soil and ask questions to it. So as we take these sensors and are actually measuring the soil, we can actually take the flip side of it and start saying, what's going on here? Is there a contaminant present? Is there something else? And ask the key questions to it. Now, the critical thing is if that, it's who has access to that, because that's an extremely powerful capability. It's extremely powerful for research at universities and for defense. But if it gets into the wrong, start asking the flip question, which is, here's the quality of what's going on in the soil. How do I disrupt it?
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. So thank you. And now we will end this panel with MP Blanchet-Jonca for 2.5 minutes. Please.
Mr. Manas, you mentioned that food security is not part of the defense strategy right now, but in the context of dependence and fragility of supply chains, we understand that this could actually be a weakness.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons why one of the key recommendations is to look at defense more broadly and resilience first, just like in the UK and in some of our Europe, specifically in New. So the Prime Minister this in the called it out in the. Sovereign Wealth Fund. We also need to call this out specifically in the Defense Industrial Strategy. And as we think about dual use in terms of research, we need to actually call this out specifically. It's not just food, like you said, it's the resilience of the supply chain, it's energy systems, it's other systems that ensure actually function as a society in times of disruption.
Bien compris. Donc, j'en retiens que les technologies.
Yes, I understand. So I understand that agricultural and food technologies should be considered as dual-use strategies, like you've just said. So but in January, the Liberal government said that they were going to close the Scientific Research Centre, which represents a huge amount of expertise. And in the context that we're talking about, do you think that it's a good idea to weaken our research in agriculture?
Well, I think that the critical piece is that we need to connect our research to our systems as well. So we have a lot of research that is going on across the country, and we also have a lot of users, farmers that are actually on the land every day. So I think we need to look at that as a strategic opportunity for ourselves and connect that data in a way that holds that data secure for the farmers, holds that data secure in Canada, but also benefits the country. Not just that research is held in one place, but that it's actually connected across. So researchers and the Defense Department of Defense can all be able to access that to be able to determine how to actually move forward in each of these areas.
This panel comes to an end, and on behalf of all the members, I would like to thank all the witnesses for coming and providing important testimony as we start this new study today. So we will suspend the meeting for a few minutes so that we can get the witnesses for the next panel join us. So the meeting is suspended. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And with that, for this panel, I would like to welcome our witnesses for this second panel. We are joined by Mr. Richard Shimoka, Senior Fellow, MacDonald Laurier Institute, joining by video conference. And we are also joined by Dr. Paul Brett, Deputy Provost and Executive Director of Professional and Continuing Education from Fisheries and Marine Institute of Memorial University of Newfoundland. And our third witness for this panel is Eduardo D. Martin, Chief Executive Officer, representing Industrio AI Incorporation. Welcome to all the witnesses. All the three witnesses I have joined by video conference. All the witnesses will have 5 minutes for their opening remarks, and then we will go to the round of questioning, and we will begin with Mr. Shimoka. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the invitation to speak today at the committee. So science and innovation are a central element of the nature of war today. As the battlefields in Ukraine, the Middle East, as well as potential ones in Asia Pacific all make clear, the ability for a modern military to exploit technological advantages and bring them into service rapidly can have dramatic impact on operational outcomes. Canada has had a strong legacy of scientific endeavor. This was particularly apparent after the Second World War. But its ability to effectively harness that capacity for the benefit of the Canadian Armed Forces has been much more limited. Olmond Salant, the first chair of the Defense Research Board, the predecessor to DRDC, made an observation after his time in office. Canada has never had an overall policy for the evolution of science and technology. From time to time, we have identified problems in this field and tried to fix them, usually unsuccessfully. This is because it was generally not understood that there's no quick fix. A science and technology capability has to be grown and built over time and shaped to a set of national goals. Salant's observation is just as apt today, especially in light of the current government's recent reforms and initiatives in this area. These include greatly increased funding and new organizations such as Borealis, which are to herald a new working relationship between the Department of National Defense and scientific centers around this country. However, to Salant's point, most of these policies will not effectively address some of the underlying systemic problems. Much of the current effort is simply to rely on existing scientific capacities, which generally have a poor compatibility to the overall military innovations and procurement system. While I think renewed focus is certainly welcome, there are real challenges that limited their effectiveness. These are ones not unique to Canada either. Many of our allies struggle with them on a day-to-day basis. The challenges cover a wide range of topics, far too many to address in these opening remarks. So I'd like to cede the rest of my time to the members so they may ask specific questions on avenues of interest that they may have interest in. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your brief remarks. We will now proceed to Dr. Brett for 5 minutes. Please go ahead, Dr. Brett. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the committee for the opportunity to contribute to your study on science and dual-use technology. My remarks will focus on how colleges and universities contribute to Canada's dual-use technology systems, and I'll use Memorial University's Marine Institute as a practical example, how federal science, innovation, and security objectives are delivered on the ground. Dual-use technologies, those with both civilian and defense applications, are now central to our research and innovation landscape. Technologies such as autonomous systems, subsea sensing, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and advanced marine engineering underpin commercial sectors such as the offshore energy and transportation sectors, while also supporting defense readiness, Arctic sovereignty, and protection of critical infrastructure. As a result, the line between science policy and national security capability has largely disappeared. In this context, the Marine Institute represents a distinct category of post-secondary institutions, one that complements traditional research universities by translating science into operational capability. First of all, our institution contributes through mission-ready workforce development and workforce resiliency. MI delivers industry-driven programs ranging from technical certifications to graduate degrees with focus on accelerated, competency-based training. This model is particularly relevant to dual-use sectors, where government and industry require graduates who can operate safely and effectively in high-risk environments upon entering the workforce. As a great example, MI trains mariners, marine engineers, and technologists who routinely work and move between civilian shipping, offshore energy, and public sector fleets, including Coast Guard and our Navy. From a public policy standpoint, this converts federal education and research investment directly into deployable national capacity. Secondly, we play a critical role in applied research and technology readiness. Many dual-use technology originate in fundamental research, but their value to public depend on whether they can be tested, validated, and hardened for real operating conditions. Our research model focuses on moving technology across the technology readiness level through prototyping, simulation, and harsh environment testing. Facilities such as ours, the launch in Holyrood, Newfoundland, now play part of NATO's Diana Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic program, where we enable autonomous and subsea systems to be tested in near Arctic conditions that cannot be replicated through modeling alone. This de-risks adoption for federal departments and aligns directly with the federal objective of accelerating commercialization under the Defense Industrial Strategy. Third, the Institute functions as a true ecosystem collaborator. Dual-use innovators require collaboration between government, industry, Indigenous partners, and international allies. We provide a neutral platform where these sectors can work together using appropriate governance, security, and ethical frameworks. Its partnership with global firms, small companies, Indigenous organizations, and federal departments illustrate how post-secondary institutions can anchor regional innovation while delivering national outcomes. Fourth, we contribute to responsible and trusted innovation. Dual-use technology raises legitimate questions about safety, ethics, environmental impact, and public confidence. By embedding regulatory literacy, cybersecurity awareness, and Indigenous partnership in both training and research, we ensure that technology developed with public support are socially legitimate and operationally credible. And finally, consideration in geography and sovereignty. Canada's marine and Arctic realities require innovation to occur in real environments, not only in laboratories, but as near Arctic institutions with long-standing co-leadership relations with the Indigenous partners. My institution provides capability that are unavailable elsewhere in our national system. In conclusion, Madam Chair, the Marine Institute demonstrates as one example of how colleges and universities can function as a delivery infrastructure for dual-use technology and dual-use science. When institutions with applied mandates are fully integrated into federal policy frameworks, public investments are translated into trained personnel, validated technologies, and measurable national capability. Thank you.
Brett, and we will now proceed to Mr. D. Martin. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chairs, members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to appear today. It's an honor to be in front of this committee at a moment when Canada is making generational decisions about the future of its defense industrial base and the role Canadian technology companies will play in it. I want to take a few minutes to share who we are, what we've built, and why we built it in Canada, and what I believe this committee can do to ensure companies like ours scale here at home rather than someplace else. Before founding Industrial, I spent more than 2 decades in enterprise technology. Before that, I worked in video games, building startups, and also working for multinationals. Part of that journey was as a general manager for Dynamics in Microsoft, and I headed up the Microsoft Development Global Development Center in Vancouver. I had a front row seat to digital transformation cloud era, and now in the rise of natural language processing and AI that is driving much of the innovation we see today. I saw how critical knowledge had been fragmented across old systems, creating an intelligence gap in operations, and how we can take the latest advancements in AI to bridge this gap. This is why my founders and I created Industrial. We're 100% Canadian owned, headquartered in Vancouver, profitable and bootstrapped. Our IP is Canadian, our team is Canadian. The choices that we make every day are Canadian choices. Why sovereignty, data sovereignty matters in a world where AI systems learn from the data, where data resides, who controls it, which jurisdiction governs it is no longer a technical question. They are questions of national security, economic competitiveness, and democratic accountability. When Canadian data operational, defense, healthcare, or critical infrastructure through foreign-owned platforms, Canada loses control of our sovereignty, and especially when our friends become unpredictable. What we have done at Industrial is built a platform called Signal, a Canadian-built and hosted platform that operates, that gives operations teams the intelligence they need to make faster decisions, run better processes, and act before problems become crisis, built specifically for how their organization works on the infrastructure they already have. Using our technology, we worked with the City of Vancouver to build them a common operating platform to support operations for the 2026 World Cup, one of the largest, most logistically complex multi-agency events ever hosted in our country. Real-time coordination across venues, infrastructure, logistics, personnel, and security, federal, provincial, and municipal partners, zero margin of failure. This is why we are in the process of standing up Signal for Defense. This is a great dual use case. Our architecture hardened for defense environments, configured around 2 modules. One delivers real-time supply chain visibility across DND and CAF networks, identifying bottlenecks, integrity risks, and sustainment gaps before they become operational failures. The other delivers a unified picture of personnel readiness, supporting force generation, deployment planning, base level reporting. Together, the modules produce a base readiness intelligence layer aligned with the priorities of our strong North End. Industrial strongly supports a defense industrial strategy and build partner buy framework. It signals to Canadian companies like ours that Canada will, where it can, build sovereign capability at home, partner where partnerships accelerate outcomes, and buy where buying is the responsible choice, and that sequencing matters. In particular, the designation of digital systems, including architectural artificial intelligence and integrated command, control, communications as sovereign capabilities, sovereign capable areas is a clear and welcome signal. It tells Canadian technology companies like mine that the front door is open and that Canadian IP, Canadian data residency, and Canadian ownership are a competitive advantage. Scaling companies at home. Madam Chair, I want to close on a question I believe this committee is uniquely positioned to influence. How do we ensure that Canada scales its technology companies at home and keeps them here to build a strong and sovereign economy? We lose our best companies because we cannot find the first serious Canadian customer fast enough, whether that's public or private. They get acquired, they move south, they scale someplace else. The defense industry strategy is an opportunity to break the pattern, but only if procurement moves at the speed of technology, and only if the buy side rewards Canadian companies that have proven themselves. 3 things would help. 1, accelerate the procurement pathways that already exist, including IDEA, the Regional Defense Investment Initiative, and other key procurement initiatives, so that Canadian SMEs can move from proof to pilot to program faster. 2nd, treat Canadian commercial deployments as legitimate proof points for defense and public safety procurement. 3rd, anchor early defense demand in Canadian SMEs the way our allies anchor theirs, so that Canadian capabilities has the runway to mature into Canadian sovereignty across all key areas of our economy. We have the talent, we have the policy direction,
Time is up, so if you can wind up in next 5-6 seconds.
Thank you for the invitation, Madam Chair, and the work this committee is doing. Merci for this position. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
And with that, now we will start our first round of questioning, and we will begin with MP Baldinelli for 6 minutes. Please go ahead, MP Baldinelli.
Again, before I begin, Madam Chair, it's just my understanding the clerk has provided you with an update on the status of our request to appear for the Minister of Industry, the Minister of National Defense, the Minister of Government Transformation, Public Works and Procurement, and the Secretary of State for Defense Procurement. Again, this is a very important study. The government has committed $81.1 billion over the next 5 years in its budget, and it's also introduced a Canada defense strategy. So I was hopeful, and we're hopeful on this side, that we could get some ministers and departments to appear.
Thank you, MP Baldinelli. Clerk has sent me the status of all the witness requests we have submitted. I have to review that email. After that, I will review it, and all the information will be sent to the
Can
members by
you
tomorrow.
provide that to us?
I have to review. It's a long email. I have to review
No,
that.
tell us verbally.
I think we have the witnesses.
Okay, at the
and
end.
I will get you the information by tomorrow
Okay.
on that. Yeah, it will be emailed, so please go ahead. I think we have witnesses, and we
Thank you.
should complete that round of questions.
Start with Mr. Shmuka. The government's new defense strategy touches upon our improving our operational capabilities. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. In the departmental results in 2024-25, Canada's maritime fleet serviceability was at 59.6%, our land fleet at 51%, and our aerospace fleet was at 42.4%. In relation to our other NATO allies, how does this stack up?
It would depend on which fleet you're talking about. I think there's a overall challenge. I'll take aerospace for an example. You are seeing the divestment of fleets of aircraft that were procured in the late Cold War in the United States. That would be considered the Carter-Reagan buildup aircraft, such aircraft like the F-16, the F-15, and whatnot, into newer platforms like the F-22, F-35, and the next generation. So when you have older platforms, essentially they're going to be a lot less serviceable. Their availability is going to decline. So in Canada's case, with our CF-18s being basically procured around 1984, their serviceability is quite low. Because we are looking at the transition towards the next generation fleet, the F-35. The drawdown of that capability is basically predicated upon having the capability to meet our NORAD commitments. Overall, our serviceability is generally low just because we have had a delayed modernization. And that goes towards.
You had mentioned in the hub in March of 2025, you said that present the RCAF has withdrawn from providing rotations for NATO air policing missions and keeps less than 8 aircraft on NORAD alert, the bare minimum of availability required. Does that concern you?
Absolutely. I think it should concern all Canadians. And I think that's been a significant pain point for many decades here towards, if you think about our bilateral relations in the United States, even before the Trump administration, you had American officials identifying this as a major challenge.
Me to the F-35 to get your thoughts on that. I mean, as a country, we currently benefit from the Canada-U.S. Defense Production Sharing Agreement, essentially where defense companies here are treated like domestic American companies. I mean, we've been part of the partnership for the F-35 since 2002. Currently, right now, there's over 110 Canadian companies have contributed to the F-35 supply chain. Right now, I think that's about over $3 million in the over 1,200 aircraft that have been produced so far. Just want to get your thoughts on the F-35. My personal opinion is we need to provide the best aircraft for our service personnel. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Sir, and I've written extensively about it, so I don't want to go too far. But the capability is clear, and every single major examination the Canadian government has done since 2010 has returned the same answer that the F-35 should be chosen. But if we can bring it back a little broader towards the science and technology aspect of it, one of the aspects of that program was the multinational sort of consortium that Canadian firms were actually quite interested in joining from the start, and the Canadian government was really positive to join in order to give Canadian companies the ability to access high technology environment for working on these capabilities, and that was seen as a major windfall since 2001.
The Prime Minister identified China as Canada's biggest security threat. And then in January of this year, he traveled to China to forge a new strategic partnership with the People's Republic of China focused on energy, agri-food, and trade. Just recently, I believe it was Thursday of last week, the Globe and Mail in a story, and it was entitled, the Chinese envoy warns Canada against sending MPs to Taiwan or warships through the Taiwan Strait. So I just want to get your comments on that. I mean, is it a good thing for Canada to be forming a strategic partnership with the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist government?
I think there are serious concerns. If you think about some of these, in some securities, I've just returned from Japan recently. If you look at their security situation, this is a major challenge that I think that affects all of our, the entire region, and our partnership has, the potential of serious issues. It has to be carefully defined, and in the areas where there are, technological sort of linkages and all that, we have to be sort of on guard, so to speak, for the potential for infiltration and other sort of activities.
Recently, this committee heard compelling testimony from security experts Michael Kovrig and Charles Burton and human rights activist Margaret McQuaid Johnson about the pursuit of an agreement to allow 49,000 Chinese EVs into this country. Would you consider them a security risk, a national security risk?
It depends on what that agreement looks like, but it certainly can be the case. I know we've seen espionage activities in other sectors that follow the same pattern which this can be used for. I mean, if you think about the level of data that can be harvested from these systems using modern AI or machine learning techniques, it can be. So there is a potential for that.
13 seconds.
Yeah, 13 seconds. Yeah, thank you. We will now proceed to MP Noor Mohammed for 6 minutes. MP Noor Mohammed, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. And it's great to see all of you here, and particularly great to see another Vancouver Granville company here in Industrio. And Edo, it's great to see you virtually. Perhaps I might start with you because you are at the nexus of a lot of things that are going on in our world right now, and in particular in some of the challenges and opportunities that the space that you're in is dealing with. So perhaps I might start by talking a little bit, or asking you to talk a little bit about your competition and what it's like in your current space. I mean, the military AI landscape right now is increasingly dominated by a lot of the neo-primes, Palantir and others that are investing in their own R&D, their own market finished products directly to military customers. What does a company like Industrio need from government to be competitive in that market without being absorbed or displaced by better capitalized American players at a time when sovereignty is super important?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Really what's important for a company like ours is customers, number one. The second thing is, in a country of our size where we do not have that robust of a corporate environment that invests in R&D, it's very challenging for my organization to grow and build and innovate quickly, because innovation needs continuous movement, building, creating, and customers. So the public sector plays into that very importantly, because in Canada, to make it, you got to, work with the corporates, and you have to work with the public sector. When this dual use strategy was revealed, I looked at it as a massive opportunity for us to leapfrog some of the technologies that are in place now that are really, there is no reason why we have to buy Palantir. We have the technology here to do it in Canada.
I mean, the DIS, the strategy explicit that AI, secure cloud, integrated command and control, and high assurance communications are sovereign capabilities that Canada has to own and control. You spent 3 years building Signal for exactly these environments. In your view, what does it practically mean for Canada to own and control an AI platform? And how does the current procurement framework actually reward sovereign by design builders like you? Like, what are where do you see the opportunity for yourself and for companies like yours in that strategy?
I think for sovereignty, we have to think about what areas of the stack do we have to give up, and what are safe to give up. And is there a good reason to give that up? And then there are. So, but the most important thing is that the storage of our data and the releasing of our data outside our borders or our jurisdiction, that's the most important thing. I mean, hands down. There are multinationals, there are organizations that we can trust that can be part of that stack and arrangement, but we have to legally bind them to that, right? And I think that, and to me, what I've seen recently is that we've been unable to do that apart from one. And so then in terms of the opportunity for our organization, when we're looking at sovereignty and we're looking at what we need to be competitive is actually creating policy together where Canada, companies like mine, SMEs work together, and with the idea of growing that technology and that sovereignty together. That's where we have to start at the very beginning. If you look at the beginnings of Palantir, they started with the US government together. Tesla started with the US government together. And that is where I think that is the type of, I would say, momentum that we need at this time to capitalize.
With the time that we have left. So, I mean, I would say any analysis right now of Canada's defense industrial strategy would say the digital sovereignty is no longer a policy debate, but it's a readiness imperative. And if that's the case, then the choices that we're making today in procurement and likely architecture as well are going to have an impact. They're going to shape Canada's operational resilience for a very long time. So when you deploy Signal in a government environment, I guess one of the questions I think it's important for everyone to hear is what concrete guarantees of data residency and I suppose model control can a Canadian SME like yours provide where a hyperscaler that perhaps is US-based could not?
Everything apart from the model. So everything we can guarantee in Canadian sovereignty. The model is the challenge and a challenge in the world. There's only 4 companies in the world that build these kinds of models. One of them is in Canada. So working together with that company, we can pretty much guarantee data sovereignty. I think in the procurement side of things, the challenge is that most procurement processes are not set up in a way to get the best product, the best or the Canadian company. It's usually centered around reducing risk and favoring multinationals. So this is where we need to shift and break that procurement so that we are favoring the really Canadian companies and sovereignty in Canada.
So what you're saying is that we should be taking intelligent managed risk and betting on Canadian companies.
Yes.
And with that, we will go to MP Blanchet-Dionca for 6 minutes. Please go ahead, MP Blanchet-Dionca.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. First question from Mr. Shemoka. In a text published by the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, it says that the defense strategy is built backwards. So instead of starting with the needs of the CAF, it's starting with the needs of the industry. Is this your diagnosis as well?
Essentially, yes. I think that the fact that we don't have a current national security strategy, one that may be promulgated later this year, really creates an issue for identifying the real areas that the Canadian Armed Forces need capabilities, right? If we're looking forward to some of these defense risks that we're looking at in the forward, whether it be in the Asia Pacific or elsewhere, it's an essential element. I would make a comparison with, let's say, the United States or United Kingdom, where you have a really effective ecosystem of identifying what is the threat, what are the responses to it, and then outlining the capabilities. And if you look at their defense industrial strategies, like the 2024 one the Biden administration put out, or the United Kingdom did last year, they make that linkage right from that top document all the way down. Whereas in Canada, we promulgated a DIS that was, it identified some areas, but it really isn't linked to real capabilities that are required.
Thank you. Is the government confusing an SID with a strategy that aims for economic impact?
I would argue yes. I think if you look at, I'll take an example, the ongoing procurement of a new submarine to replace the Victoria class, a large portion of the focus of that program has been on the industrial technical benefits that Canada can accrue from that program. Whereas if you look at an ally, let's say Australia, for example, which has many submarine programs like the AUKUS program or the one before the attack class, they were very much focused on not having 100% ITB return, but actually looking at, well, what are the developmental areas that we can bring into country from this procurement and really leverage our future defense capabilities from that. And that's part and parcel of a lot of the more better run countries internationally in this area.
Thank you. So if we're not talking about the basic needs of our military capabilities that we really need, are we going to look at impact without actually giving the capacities that our CAF needs?
I think the way that the procurement system works, where it's really an amalgam of these different interests, that you will generally get a system that the Canadian Armed Forces can use or utilize, but it's often, I wouldn't call it suboptimal, but it certainly is not maybe the most ideal capability in that sense. I would point to the Fixing Search and Rescue program, where we have an aircraft that it may be just entering service now or is about to enter service, and this is 7 years over the time it was actually. We got our first delivery, and because it wasn't the ideal aircraft to meet Sarah, and a big portion of why it was selected is because the industrial offsets were seen to be better from the competitor that won.
10% d'achats de défense au
10% of defense buying from Canadian industry. Do you think it's already done without taking into account what Canada must develop itself?
I think that we have to be careful as well, right? And I believe in the last panel you asked a question about Bombardier aircraft and that, and I think that there's in that time you asked about, I think the potential to procure a maritime patrol aircraft, where just to develop the P-8 in the United States would basically cost just as much as it did for Canada to actually procure the aircraft, right? So I think there are certainly areas where a manufacturer like Bombardier has an advantage, and we should look to those. But that really requires a careful understanding: A, what are our requirements? B, how much it costs, and making the sort of the judgment of, is this an area we should put our money in, and what would be the benefit of it, and what potential is the market in Canada or elsewhere. And I think that that's an area that, because of lack of capacity within the department and a lot of different other factors, it's not something that we do really well, but we really should do well given the objectives of the government to increase domestic defense production.
Mr. Stremoka, thank you very much. To come back to the Bombardier issue, $10.4 billion, and there wasn't even a bidding so that the Canada company could propose anything. We immediately chose an American company. So in your opinion, don't you think that this is a file that illustrates the tension between fast buying in another country and also the development of a national industrial capacity that we can't define, essentially?
Yeah, I think if you think about the cost to develop it, there's many other capabilities that Bombardier could provide that I think would be more cost effective. There's certain areas where, if you look at the opportunity to get onto the P-8 program, that made sense in that iteration. But if you think about something like airborne early warning, which is a program that is upcoming for the Royal Canadian Air Force, and will likely incur a significant development cost on the government sort of expenditure. I think those are the areas you want to focus on. We have to what I would call quick wins, areas where we can just get the capability quickly from a foreign producer. I would actually, if you think about a country like France, which really focuses on domestic development of their capabilities, they bought aircraft from Boeing or from others for stuff like airborne early warning or tankers and whatnot. So even they will look to foreign suppliers to meet some demands, and then focus on other areas that they identify as being the actual capabilities that the domestic industrial base can best develop and produce.
Up for MP Blanchet-Jonca, and now we will start our second round, and we will begin with MP Mahal for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
I have a clarification. We would have another round 3 as well. Thank you. I just want to say thank you to all the witnesses who are present in this testimony. I would want to start with Mr. Stremoka. In May 2019, the Macdonald-Laurier Institute published a report that you authored titled Catastrophe, Assessing the Damage from Canada's fighter replacement FISICO. In it, you note, and I quote, "The current Liberal government's partisan handling of the fighter replacement file brings new level of unethical incompetence to this dismissal history." 7 years have passed. So what would you say now? Has it gone worse? Has it been better? What is it now?
I mean, the time when I written that, this came after the Super Hornet abortive subordinate purchase and other sort of mishandlings of the file. The fact that we selected this capability in 2022 or 23 and then have sort of started to procure the systems is certainly a positive step. If you interview individuals from the Air Force, they are undertaking this transition currently. I think that understandably that given the comments of the Trump administration on Canadian sovereignty and other aspects that has caused significant dislocation in our bilateral relationship and a sort of not a pause but it brought this program under some level of increased review. I don't. If I watch how it's progressing currently, the Air Force is still acquiring aircraft. They've continued their purchases even because of the way that the U.S. system is required to procure them. And but I don't know how well this uncertainty really helps and how long it can go much further. So I think it's certainly better than it was in 2019 when I had written that article, but. At this time, there's still serious questions, and it is affecting to some degree the ability to get to this new aircraft.
You have also warned that a mixed firefighter fleet would have dangerous consequences for Canada's defense and physical position. Can you explain why maintaining multiple fighter platforms create those risks in terms of cost, training, and operational effectiveness?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, we know how many pilots, sustainment individuals that actually operate the fighter fleet at one time, and it's quite limited because of essentially 30 years of neglect of the Canadian Armed Forces. And as a result, the ability for them to scale up the purchase of two fleets is just not really possible. We're already seeing in many other different areas, such as with the MQ-9 UAV program, the PA program, real challenges for the Air Force to actually transition to the next generation because they just don't have the crews. So it is really difficult to imagine just the personnel side for us to transition to a second fleet. But I will also say that the second option, Gripen and others, thinking about the integration challenges into a NORAD environment, the secure systems, the cryptological aspects of it, integration, it makes it really challenging where the cost of integrating that specific fighter or even many other NATO's aircraft would just make this prohibitively expensive and really not add any sort of real capability or positive capability development whatsoever.
If I can seize my remaining time to MP Ho.
Okay, 1 minute, 5 seconds.
Okay. I guess my question is for Mr. Shimooka. So over the past year, the Liberal government has announced multiple new defense bureaucracies, and each with its own mandate and hiring of new overpaid Liberal-type bureaucrats. For example, the Defense Investment Agency CEO stands to make up to $900,000 per year. So based on your research, does creating more bureaucracies actually improve Canada's ability to defend, to deliver military capability, or does it risk further fragmentation?
I think the fragmentation is a real danger. I think that, and going back to the previous point just about capacity of personnel, that capacity of really key subject matter experts who understand this defense capabilities, who have the security clearances, the technical knowledge, is quite limited because we haven't invested in this area, right? And so if you're further bifurcating those individuals into smaller sort of groups like Borealis and all that, I think it has the challenges to actually diminuate the ability to actually get many of these systems into service. And I think that is a real challenge because it's difficult to generate them quickly. It will take many decades to get back to where we were.
We'll proceed to MP Ellison. For 5 minutes, please go ahead, MP Ellison.
All right. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for coming. This has been fascinating testimony. I'm reasonably new to this committee, and I'm already learning a lot of new information. So first question, Mr. DeMartin. You're probably aware our defense industrial strategy is that we want to support Canadian companies and scale dual-use technologies. So how would you describe how the current federal investments are helping companies like yours scaling operational intelligence platforms using AI that would work for both defense and civilian applications in Canada?
Well, I mean, thank you for the question. There is no help at the current moment. The help is to actually work for defense and have a contract. So, but the industry strategy just is relatively new. So I suspect that that's coming through procurement. How it would help me is that I have clients in the private sector that are benefiting from our technology. That technology creates a platform that I can use in defense. What I create in defense is slightly nuanced, but the technology is all the same. So we're creating better technology by having more customers and building to different use cases that allows my company to now be able to say, hey, I'm going to go sell this outside of Canada now. And that technology I can sell in the private sector, and I could sell maybe through NATO on the defense side of things to our friends. So how this helps us, a company like us, is really helps us stand up and have the use cases. The first thing people ask you when you try to export is, who's using this in Canada? And my response is, normally in my business, the response is a few people, but most of my clients are in the US. So what I'd like to say is, everyone in BC, most of the people, a bunch of people across of Canada, and public sector. And the people go, wow, okay, now you have a proven technology and a platform that I'm interested in buying because you have all the use cases there. And I start to leapfrog other people. It's competition. We need to compete in the world, and we have to compete in our own turf first.
Okay. And would you say that you are now in a better competitive position?
If we can procure at as I said in my remarks, if we can procure quickly, I will be. Yes, 100%.
Okay, thank you. So from my perspective, I'm from Winnipeg. I'm there right now, and it is currently snowing. So I heard your initial remarks. I listened to with great envy. So in Winnipeg, we have quite an extensive defense infrastructure. We have a major air base. And also a quite large aerospace industry. So how could a region like ours that has all this infrastructure already better connect with a company like yours to create local jobs?
That would be amazing. So we can exchange our numbers after. But I think, honestly, what I've been doing as of late is at CADC later in the month. I was at CAF Outlooks. My organization was at CAF Outlooks earlier, gathering information and then trying to make connections. And so these kinds of conferences is where we start to knock boots as an organization. I never knew of these conferences up until this year. So without this policy in place, without this push to buy Canadian, the connections are happening. So that would be the right place for us to connect with folks in Manitoba for sure. I think you're on mute.
Yourself, MP Ellison.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So, given what you're saying, then would you agree that the current push to rely less on foreign partners and to encourage the development of these businesses in Canada is going to help with that?
Yes. Yeah. We're starting. Absolutely, no doubt.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I keep getting muted enough to find the unmute again. So, okay, thank you very much, Dr. Brett. So you're working with Diana. All right. Well, thank you very much.
And Blanchet-Jonca for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will continue with Mr. Shamoka. I wanted to come back to the issue on planification. Quebec has 60% of aerospace manufacturing in Canada. Montreal is one of the rare poles of producing, like Seattle. We are the only ones who can produce an airplane from A to Z. Do you think that credible IDS should also have an aerospace strategy with contracts and measures?
I think there's two components to that. I think the base funding, the science and research development hub that Montreal consists of, and frankly, it's highly integrated, not just within the province, but with the United States and within Winnipeg was just mentioned Sarita's case. So I think that portion of it, funding the baseline, the people who can undertake that kind of research, who support those industries, is really critical. And that's if you look at some of the great hubs like Seattle or in Japan around Tokyo or in Nagoya, you see that kind of level there. On the overall level, it has to be careful. I think Canada, as I said before, what capabilities we pick. I think Bombardier has, we were talking about earlier about airborne early warning, right? Which is an area that they have done significant work, not just with Saab, but if you look at they have several programs with the United States Army on the ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems. Having those contracts that are supporting those sort of contracts kind of makes that an actual objective to sort of identify that. I think that is a credible area, but it really requires a careful understanding of what are the military requirements. Like, is this actually going to be operationally relevant? Because there has been in the past where we have funded some capabilities and it really didn't turn out nearly as well. And the Canadian Air Forces were the ones who essentially bore the brunt of operating a system that was just not really effective. And in a lot of these cases, just to add very quickly, it's not going to be purely a Canadian sort of solution. So in Bombardier's case, they provide the aircraft, but really the systems integration, the mission system specifically is probably going to be an American company or a foreign company that sort of provides some of those capabilities, because we don't have the knowledge, the technical knowledge, or the IP to do so.
19 seconds. Okay, good. Thank you. And we will now proceed to MP Ho for 5 minutes, and then we will end the panel with the MP de Ontario for 5 minutes. MP Ho.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My remaining questions are also for Mr. Samuka. So the Liberal government has poured billions into so-called defense innovation with an Ottawa knows best approach of picking winners and losers under the guise of so-called Buy Canadian, even though it's been reported that under the Liberal government definition, it can use the Buy Canadian label, even if it buys from a company that's foreign-owned. And yet we are still seeing the Canadian Armed Forces continue to face capability gaps and delayed procurement, despite all the Liberal bureaucracy and all the Liberal insiders that have been hired to staff these brand new bureaucracies. So in your assessment, is Canada seeing this increased spending without tracking these corresponding outcomes? And what does it say about the effectiveness of these Liberal policies?
So I think certainly there are areas where we could in Canada do better and sort of support industry. Aerospace is certainly an area there we have a natural sort of development, and there are others. We look at the nuclear industry as well as another area, and then I can go on and on, right? The reality, I think, however, for a lot of the major defense capabilities, because we have only been buying foreign systems and we don't have a ecosystem in Canada, and I would make the point that to the other panelists to tag along with that, is that a lot of Canadian firms have looked to the United States as a better partner. The United States government is a better sort of area to actually sell their equipment because it has large scale. They have much more of an ability to sort of identify and talk to people within their government to sort of get what's the requirements, and it's a much better sort of relationship. And I think the reality is that we haven't really invested in these areas. So you're not going to get military systems anytime in the next 5 to 10 years in a lot of sort of key cases without significant investment, sustained investment to do so. So in my personal view, I would argue that we probably need a two-stage system where if we are identifying certain capabilities as being something that we want to develop, we want to go forward and acquire that. We take a long-term view on that while sort of immediately dealing with a lot of these really critical security challenges that we face, and addressing them quickly by buying off the shelf from other countries, but also having the investment behind them. Maybe do co-production with other countries, because I think if we just immediately jump, like, and there has been talk about this, to try and find an immature Canadian solution, it's just not going to end well. We're going to get to the Ross rifle of today, or other sort of capabilities that just were not mature enough, and not capable. And again, the Canadian forces will suffer as a result.
So I'd like to use the rest of the time we have is to resume the debate that of the motion that was moved on April 27th, about the motion that was put on notice on April 24th. We saw the Liberal members on this committee vote down the ability to have cameras on and move to other business, and on April 27th, and to shut off the cameras and to have the Canadian public to be able to
point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, MP Noor Mohammed.
It's important that if we're going to have this conversation, that we actually state what the facts were. And Mr. Ho is misrepresenting what actually, I wasn't at the meeting, but from what I watched, this is a misrepresentation.
This is getting into debate, MP Ho.
Yeah, so anyway, the effect of that was that we couldn't continue the debate, and just would like to resume debate using the time that we have in this meeting. So, and just to speak in support of it, it is my motion, the motion that was put on notice on April 24th. That's a fact. It was moved on April 27th. And I just want to speak a little bit about my support for this motion, because it's about the study of the $200 million space pad that we've seen as just turns out to be a big gravel pit with Liberal insiders who are connected, and it's just another procurement disaster, one after the other. And it's a pattern of how this Liberal government, they call it a new Liberal government, is not really new at all. It's following the same playbook that the last Liberal government, that there's the so-called the last Liberal Prime Minister, of overpaying, using taxpayer dollars and getting a lot less. And this is the Standing Committee of Science and Research, right? So, we're supposed to examine things about public policy and how to strengthen science, and by shutting down a study like this, members who vote against it, they're anti-science by connection. And we want to study science, we want to support science, support research, we want to support Canadian innovation and Canadian technological capacity. The Liberals have a lot of rhetoric. They're laughing, but they spend a lot of rhetoric and a lot of taxpayer money with very little outcomes. And on paper, this government is spending $200 million for an agreement concerning this this space pad in Nova Scotia that, again, when you look at the pictures, it's just a gravel pit that should cost a fraction of the money. And, on paper, again, it says it's about space exploration. Again, an endeavor that we should endeavor to do. It's about launch capacity. Again, sounds great on paper. National defense said, and we are having trouble getting the national defense minister. I mean, it is about national defense too, right? And the Canada's future in the space economy, which is so very important, and a matter that we're discussing in this committee. And they're serious subjects, right? And they deserve the scrutiny that we as committee members, just take a step back, as committee members, we're not here to defend and excuse failure. If there's something that has gone wrong, it is our job as committee members, regardless of party, to get to the bottom of the issue. Like, it's not us as a legislative. There's the difference between the legislative branch and the executive branch. And the Liberals seem to think that the Liberal MPs think that they're part of the executive branch and they can do whatever they want, and they seem to blur the lines. But we live in a country that has three branches of government, right? There's separation of powers. And that's one of the key fundamental cornerstone of our democracy. So of course we support that. And space matters. Just getting back on the topic, it matters for defense. It matters for things like Arctic sovereignty, again, which the Liberals talk a lot about. It matters for communications, things like weather forecasting, disaster response, and we know there's been a lot of disasters under this Liberal government. Agriculture, navigation. Witnesses we've seen today even about agriculture, navigation, telecoms, national security. National security, which of course something that the Liberals don't take very seriously, and the space is of course something that's the next frontier of economic competition, and it's not going to stop at our borders, and it certainly will not stop because the Liberals want it to stop. So Canada should have ambitions about space. And this is, of course, something that's worth pursuing. And again, this project is great on paper, but when we want to dig into the weeds and get to look at the paperwork, the agreements that are signed, find out which Liberal insiders are getting rich, and it seems like if the Liberals are rolling their eyes. I mean, are they the ones that are getting rich? Who knows? We want to get to the bottom of this. And Canada does have a proud history in space, right? Like we are, like the Canadarm, which is not just another piece of technology. It's a symbol of Canadian ingenuity. When we had a country that could still build things, we're now a country that is building at unimaginable speeds, building unimaginably slow on all things like housing, infrastructure, energy projects. And Canadian astronauts have inspired generations of Canadians, from students, young people. Of course, young people is a generation that are people that this Liberal government has continuously let down over and over again. It's inspired Canadian engineers, researchers, machinists, technicians, and scientists. And Canada has always punched above its weight. So again, before the Liberals accuse me of conservatives talking down on Canada, we're not talking down on Canada. We're not talking down on Canadians. We're just talking about how
1% at a time.
Government is letting down Canadians. That's what we're really talking about.
That's why I hope
so again, this motion is not, this motion is pro-space, it's pro-science. If you're going to vote against it, you're anti-space, you're anti-science, you're anti-taxpayer, and we just want to get some accountability, get some results out of this motion, and that's why we're talking about this today, and because we can't have this space ambition. This launch pad is a symbol of Canadian ambition, without the accountability of the vision that is trying to carry out. Because without accountability, this is just another vanity project, and we've seen the Liberals pursue ideological vanity projects over and over again, and they have not stopped short of doing that. As soon as this new Liberal Prime Minister has took office, that's a lot of their bills have been vanity ideological projects, and it's proven that he's not just a new prime minister, he's just another Liberal. And so Parliament has the duty to ask questions, and the Parliament asks questions through the committee, right, through the subject matter of the committee, and this is the Science and Research Committee. And of course, when we're talking about space and this gravel pit that the Liberals are calling a space pad, we as this committee is where we would study it. I mean, I just don't see which other committee we would be studying something of this nature. And these Liberals, they want Canadians to believe that this is some bold national investment. And of course, they're going to wrap it around with their slogans. We know how much Liberals love slogans like Build Canada Strong and all that. And so they're going to want to, and then they say, now want to launch rockets at home again. An endeavor that is worth pursuing in its vision. But again, and we just want to ask very simple questions, things like when? What about timelines? And we know that this project has failed to meet timelines over and over again, and I'll get into the details of how we got there later, and how it's failed. And when is the first successful launch going to be? I mean, again, this project has missed.
Sorry for interrupting. 1% at a time. MP Ho, I have, the clerk has brought to my attention some rules in regards to moving motion on the motions for which the debate was adjourned previously. So I will ask the clerk to please clarify.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I was informing the Chair that to resume debate on a motion on which debate has already been adjourned previously, the Chair can use their prerogative to put the matter on the notice of meeting of any future meeting, or a member of this committee can move that the debate on the motion be resumed, meaning that is the decision of the committee to resume that debate, or otherwise a member by himself or herself cannot go ahead and resume the debate on his or her motion. It's a committee decision, basically. Thank you.
Okay, so sorry, for interrupting. 1%, please, if I can clarify. So, as per that rule, we will have to vote if the debate can be resumed on MP Ho's motion, because the debate on this motion was adjourned in the previous meeting. So, I will ask the clerk to please take the vote.
What happens with like the consequences?
One second, I'm just, 1 second. So, in order to resume debate, you have to move a motion that the debate be resumed, and then it will be up to the members to make a decision whether the debate can be resumed or not. So, would you like to move the motion?
To resume
Resume debate on your motion,
like
which...
to move a motion to resume debate on this matter.
Okay, so we have a motion by MP Ho to resume debate on the motion for which the debate was adjourned in the previous meeting. So I will ask the clerk to please take the vote.
Well, thank you, Chair. Monsieur Deschênes-Thériault?
No.
Mr. Olfolsen?
No.
Not part of the
He
rules
needs to have
committee.
his camera on.
He needs to have his camera on.
MP
It is a
Olsen,
rule.
can you please have your camera on?
I don't see him on the screen. But where is he on the screen?
There he is.
Okay.
Okay, I vote no.
Ms. McKelvey?
No. No.
Mr. Noor Mohammed?
Nope.
And Mr. Rana?
No.
Mr. Baldinelli?
Yes.
And Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Mr. O?
Yes.
Mr. Mahal?
Yes.
And Monsieur Blanquette-Jonca?
Oui, Blanchette-Jonca, oui.
Okay, yeas pour 5, 5, and nays contre 6, 6.
Okay, so the motion to resume the debate on the motion is defeated. Time is up for MP Ho. We will go to MP Deschamps-Thériault for 5 minutes. Please go ahead before this panel comes to an end. Sorry for all the witnesses. Now we will have MP Deschamps-Thériault for 5 minutes and we will end the panel. MP Deschamps-Thériault.
Merci tout d'abord aux témoins.
Thank you, first of all, to our witnesses for having stayed with us. The study is very important. It has to do with defense resources, and we'd like to thank you for the time you've taken to enlighten our work. My first question is for Mr. DeMartin. So you already mentioned a few things in your remarks, but what would be the winning conditions, or rather, in terms of the role of your business in the research ecosystem, what would the winning conditions be so that we're able to have collaboration between research centers, colleges, and universities, and private business in order to bring about concrete and applicable results that can be used both for civilian innovation but also for defense purposes?
Thank you for the question. The conditions that would be appropriate would be a clear understanding of what is the problem we want to solve, a clear role for research in that use case, a clear role for business in that use case, and the environment to work together to advance those initiatives, and at the end, validation from the end user. Those are sort of the standard conditions to move any type of collaboration between private and research together.
Thank you. And Mr. Brett, I'd like to hear from you. The investments that we'll be making in research are an important pillar of our investment strategy for the defense sector. At your university, and your lab is participating in the Defense Acceleration Program for the North Atlantic. So I'd like to hear from you. Why is it important to have access to these programs for your institution? What are the results for the research ecosystem at your university?
Thank you so much for the question. We've operated in a space where we've partnered with small to medium-sized businesses as they try to harden their technology and span that valley of death from discovery to commercialization. Having access to systems like Diana to attract new innovation into a testing lab, validation lab like the one that we use at our institution I think are pretty important to our fiscal health, to be able to support us as an organization. The defense space is an area, I think, in the Canadian landscape that we need to be able to tap into that ecosystem. So our ecosystem is just that, a place for SMEs to come and validate their technologies.
And so you said that you work with small businesses. Can you elaborate a little more on what the winning conditions are for a productive partnership between a research center or university like yours and small businesses?
Yeah, again, thank you for the follow-on question. One of the conditions for success is clear policy around IP. Universities are infamous for stranding IP, but how do we work with small to medium-sized enterprises to ensure that their IP is protected to ensure that they can move forward? Understanding the bureaucracy of federal, provincial ecosystems from a funding perspective is also pretty important to our survival.
Thank you. And one last question for you. We know that universities and colleges are mainly provincial responsibilities. So what opportunities do you see to better mobilize provinces and territories in the implementation of research in the context of the defense industrial strategy? I'd like to hear from you on that.
Thank you. There, a lot of the traditional vehicles to move investment, research investment dollars are in place in the Canadian context through, tri-council agencies. DRDC has been talked about several times throughout this committee meeting. Understanding how DRDC mobilizes funding in the defense space is also an area that needs some clarity and demystifying, if I'm to be honest, from a institutional perspective. But it is important that we demystify and reduce the bureaucracy in those spaces.
Merci beaucoup et merci à tous les témoins.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all our witnesses.
The round of questioning comes to an end. I just have one committee business thing to get it approved in regards to the budget for the study on Canada's dual use and defense research needs. The budget was circulated to all the members. Is it the will of the committee to adopt the budget? Yes. Okay, adopted. Just one quick announcement. We have Made in Canada Solutions for Global Health Security, a parliamentary science fair on May 6 from 6 to 8 p.m. in room 228, Vellore Building. If you are free, please drop by. So with that, I want to thank all the witnesses for appearing before the committee. On behalf of all the members, I would really like to thank you for providing your important testimony. And with that, the meeting comes to an end. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Yes. Okay, the meeting is adjourned.